John, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? All right. Third time's charm. All right. I'd like to call the Village of Cottage Grove Village Board of Trustees to order. It is Monday, April 3rd, and now 6:33 on my watch. We are holding this as a Zoom meeting. The link is at the top of the agenda, or the audio link is our dial-in number, and ID is at the top of the agenda as well, if you prefer that. We will start with determination of a quorum. So if we do a roll call, Lisa, please.
Allen?
Present.
Murphy?
Present.
Peterson?
Here.
Ratcliffe?
Here.
Valencia?
Present.
Vandervelde?
Present.
And Williams.
Present. Third time over. All right. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance then. We have a quorum and the agenda was properly posted. Find a flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I would like to start off with welcoming those that were re-elected and those that were elected tonight for new terms or a new term or return terms. We will start with public appearances, public's opportunity to speak on any subject. Please state your name, your address, and keep your comments to no more than 3 minutes in case we have a number of folks who'd like to speak, please. So I will pause and allow anybody to jump in. All right, then we'll move on to item 5. Discuss and consider the meeting minutes from our regular village board meeting held on April 19th. Any questions, comments, or edits?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thanks, Melissa. Is there a second?
Second.
I think it was Sarah by photo finish. Motion second. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Next item, let's see. I don't see. I'm going to move things around a little bit. We're waiting for Deb to join us, who can contribute to the next item on new business. So we're going to switch right down to, unless anybody opposes this, to reports from village boards and commissions and committees. And starting off with Community Development Authority, and that would be Sarah.
Yeah, so there's information in your packet on the selection of a new logo. And so, Aaron, thank you, and Matt for writing the memo. The CDA members did review the logos put out by Distillery and voted on with the point system. You can see that in the memo, and you'll see the ones that ranked the highest for the CDA. And we're looking to hopefully come up with a final logo here tonight with the board. So Matt and Aaron, if you want to add anything to that.
No, I don't think so. Are you seeing the screen that I'm sharing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Staff report? Okay. So these are the 4 initial logos in their first meeting. Was options 2 and 3 that got moved forward by the committee. So Distillery had various versions of each of those that you can see here. Option 2, the intent was to kind of reflect both trees and buildings under construction at the same time, which I think the committee thought was an interesting idea, but didn't quite come together in any of these. With option 3, it was intended to show both the business side of the village and the residential side. The different shapes and colors of trees were intended to represent diversity, and then having them connected was supposed to kind of give the impression of a gateway. And the committee did like that quite a bit. They weren't as sold on shaping the trees as, VCG for Village of Cottage Grove. That I think was came off a little cartoonish. So we ended up with 4 versions of this logo and one more try at this one as the final selections that the committee voted on. And it was pretty close among these top 3. The original one was a little simpler than the others, I think, but pretty close to what the original one was. I think the issue they had with the original version of this was that they thought the residential side looked a little bit too much like a barn and silo, which they added some eaves to this and made it look a little more residential. The second one kind of attempts to do the same thing with, in a little bit different manner. Option 3 just added a little bit more detail with some of these, kind of hints of windows. Option 4 was a little bit more 3-dimensional. And then one of the committee members had requested kind of a combination of the 2, which didn't fare quite as well. It was the top 3 that were pretty close. So I guess we're just looking for a vote from you guys to kind of pick one finalist. You don't necessarily have to pick the one the CDA picked, but they did lean pretty heavily, at least towards this version of the logo, whichever specific one you pick.
The board. Any thoughts on first, second, third, or fourth that Aaron will kind of walk through? Or as far as a logo?
Yeah, I kind of like the first version, that it's more simplistic. So you kind of get to focus on the whole theme of it rather than the other little busy pieces. But I can understand adding them to make it look more residential or like buildings. But I guess that's just my initial thoughts.
When you say the first version, you mean back a couple pages?
Oh no, the first one on this.
Okay.
Top one.
Okay, the one that got first place from the CDA.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
I'll echo that. I mean, I think the extra. I mean, regardless if it's smaller or bigger, right? Like the windows are not going to really make a big impact all that much compared to the first place ranking here we're looking at. I think I personally prefer the silhouettes over the extra intricate detail, for what it's worth.
Nice work by the committee. The first one looks good to me.
I just want to note that I appreciate how much Cottage Grove stands out in the logo. That was one of my comments, I think, previously, just that I was hoping that the village of Cottage Grove would stand out more. And I think that these logos do a nice job of having it stand out, as well as capturing more of an. I like the trees and the color. So I'll make a motion to approve the top one on the screen, the one that placed first, to approve that logo.
I'll second that.
All right. Thanks, Melissa. Thanks, Paul. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor then?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right.
Just one comment there. The work of the consultant isn't done yet. They're going to be continuing to work with the CDA on how best to brand and roll out this new logo, and they'll help us with a strategy for that. And so there'll be some more work to come from this.
So Matt, I'm assuming they'll provide like a communication plan, and so on to kind of, as you said, roll it out. So a communication plan would kind of lay out how each thing would go and how you'd introduce the logo and how you communicate to whether it's residents or businesses, et cetera. Correct?
Yep. Yeah, and maybe a tagline or something like that to go along with it. Things like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Put in my plug for how we could see the logo on a banner that would go on utility poles. That's my little. We want tourists to realize where they are when they come stay at our hotels and eat at our restaurants. So that's my little plug for banners.
Yeah, it was a nice blend to the turnout of utilizing our past logo, but freshening it up, and yeah, everyone seems pretty happy with it so far.
And Matt, to clarify, other departments will kind of fall in line with this new logo, right? The Parks and Rec, for example, and yes.
Yes, I think we'd want that across the board. I know our PD has a different logo specific to their, the shield in their uniforms. I think that would be the only outlier there.
And perhaps that's just something where it's an extra little tag on the patrol cars or explorers that appears.
Sure.
To tie it in.
Yeah, and they might have some recommendations for that as well as how to handle that. I'm sure they run into that with other communities.
Yeah. All right. Sarah, anything else with CDA? That was a lot. But...
No, that covers it.
Okay, more work to be done, but exciting stuff. All right. We'll move on then, and Matt will flag me when he sees Deb pop in. Then we'll move on to Parks and Rec.
She's here, John. Deb is here.
You said, thank you, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we'll go too far down the line, and then I'll forget, and you guys will at least get me corrected here. Plus, if we have Chief Archibald on too, I don't want to hold him up. All right, so to keep everybody on their toes, we'll move on back to item 6, which is new business. And this is just to discuss and consider an amendment to the Village of Cottage Grove 2021 budget, moving approximately $30,000 from a capital projects fund 410 to an account number 410-57501-810, capital equipment purchase municipal vehicles, to general fund 100-52200-380, and this is in regards to the 2% fire dues eligible for expense for the fire truck savings, which I think we are planning on placing that order next year or so. So first of all, I want to thank Melissa, Deb, Matt, legal, Chief Archibald, for working through all this. Again, it's just making sure that we account correctly for these 2% dues. And they did an excellent job at sorting all this out so that we have it kind of segregated accordingly. And I think the other note is that the sum of, I said, approximately 30,000, we don't get the value of the 2% dues from the state until a bit later in the year. So that's why just want to make sure that that's noted, if we consider approving this consideration. So with that, I don't know if we want to start with Deb or Matt or Melissa or how we would like to kind of go through this. There is a memo in the packet referencing this.
I think Deb can give a quick summary of the memo and see if there's any questions.
Sure. Well, I won't go into the background deeply because you've all heard about it and I wrote about it in the memo. But just wanted to point out that going forward, in order to keep the segregation between the 2% fire dues revenue and budget amount and what's being spent, we're going to be asking the town to separate that on the invoice that they send us every month, which is how I pay the fire expenses, so that we'll know which expenses are regular operating expenses and which are 2% fire dues eligible expenses. And for this year, we're going to be we have set aside some monies in our capital fund. We have been for the purchase of a new fire engine, knowing that it's going to be coming down the road here very soon. So the request is just simply moving $30,000 of what we had budgeted in the 410 capital account into the general fund in order to be designated for 2% fire dues eligible expenses. And I want to make sure that it's understood that this is not going to affect our levy or our budget this year at all. It's a neutral, it's just an exchange from one fund to the other. So with all that, if there's not any questions, staff recommends approving the budget request so that we can go forward and make sure that we're compliant with any audit that might come up in the near future.
All right. Thanks, Deb, for the summary. Any questions from any board members?
I don't have a question, but I do want to thank staff and Chief Archibald for working with us to understand exactly what was going on with this, with the 2% fire dues and how we could work out how it was done in the past was not how we had to do it going forward. So I'm glad we were able to figure that out. With that, I'll make the motion to approve a budget amendment to the Village of Cottage Grove's 2021 budget, moving the 2021 fire dues amount from the capital project fund to the general fund into the 2% fire dues eligible expense fire truck savings account.
I'll second.
All right, second is Sarah, third by Troy. Thank you. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries then. Thanks again, everybody. All right, then we're going to keep the leapfrogging around here. We're going to go over to Parks and Rec with Heidi.
Thanks. So we had a special meeting of Parks, Rec, and Forestry Committee last week so we could get the playground equipment for West Lawn's Red Hawk Park ordered. We also had a brief discussion with Continental Properties on their plans for the parkland, and we also discussed moving forward on the capital improvement plan based on feedback from our previous meeting. So those were kind of just extra things we talked about. But in your packet, there is a memo for action tonight to award the bid to Lee Recreation for the Red Hawk Park Playground. It was approved as part of the budget to come out of our park development fund to get a playground in the park. So Sean, I don't know if you want to add anything to that?
Thanks, Heidi. I think, am I on? Yes, I am. Good. You pretty much covered it. Yeah, this went out to the residents in the area, and they picked the design that they liked. As it says in your memo, that this is phase one of hopefully a two-phase project. Phase two beginning in 2022, and BCI Burke and Lee Recreation, both local companies, were selected for the project. So looking to award the bid and get the process started so we can get a playground in as soon as possible.
Any questions for Heidi or Sean? If not, consideration for a motion then.
I'll move that we approve and award the recommendation for the playground equipment at West Lawn Red Hawk Park as stated in the memo.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, David. Motion second then. Is there any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. All right, very exciting to have that moving forward. I think the residents over there will be very happy with that first phase going in this year. Anything else, Heidi, from parks? You mentioned Continental and their park, potential park.
Yeah, so they brought some revisions to their concept plan from, their previous iteration. And I think they're still working on refining a couple things. If we need ADA compliant paths from a parking area up to the dog park entrance. And I think that the committee was pretty happy with how the layout was looking with a small dog park area and then larger for bigger dogs. Fencing between double gates, waters kind of stubbed in, so then we could add drinking fountains or a dog washing station in the future if we wanted that. And the timeline would be delayed a year for opening, so it would be 2023 for opening, so the grass could really take hold and it doesn't get all torn up and muddy for many years after you want it established. So I think that'll be part of their next presentation, probably at the Plan Commission. They'll incorporate any changes the Parks Committee recommended. So. And then just a reminder that Parks switched their meetings to the fourth Thursday of the month, so our next Parks meeting is May 27th.
All right, any questions for Heidi? All right, well, then we'll move on to Ad Hoc Housing Task Force. Paul.
Yeah, thank you, John. We did have a scheduled meeting this past Tuesday, April 27th. It was a light agenda. Staff was going to present on history of suburban development. We weren't able to move forward with the meeting. We did not have a quorum. So our next scheduled meeting is Tuesday, May 25th. It should be a good one. We have Angela Jones joining us from United Way. She'll be speaking on affordable housing, need diversity and home ownership, on economic housing data. And I had mentioned that when the weekly agendas go out, I'll send a friendly reminder, encourage our committee members for attendance for that meeting. As far as Aaron's presentation, I'll be working with Aaron to figure out another time for him to present the presentation that he was bringing this past Tuesday. So Aaron, am I missing anything?
Nope, I think that's it.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Aaron. Then we'll move on to Law Enforcement Committee. That's Sarah Troy.
Troy, you want to take it or me?
Looks like you're on it. Thanks, Sarah.
Yeah, sure. It was a fairly short meeting. We went through a few pieces on the chief's report, nothing too too exciting to share there. The staff are busy. There's an officer out on family leave. The K-9 officer is out with an injury, so our K-9, maybe he's back now, but they've been off duty. The school resource officer is back, not as busy as had been in the past, but keeping an eye on that and watch where that trend is going. Other than that, nothing else really was discussed. But again, Chief or Troy, anything to add?
I do not have anything to add.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. Any questions for Sarah? And I would like to thank Sarah for jumping in for me for that meeting, because I was at the Public Works and Properties Committee meeting at the same time. So we had a special meeting, and again, there is an action and consideration here. This is to discuss and consider the award for BB and Bus Road project to RG Houston. I will turn it over to Kevin Vizan and JJ to kind of walk us through that.
Sure. Can you hear me, John?
I can, and I hope everybody else can.
Perfect. All right. Well, I think all the info is in your packet, and basically there's a memo there just to kind of explain the project. I guess there's kind of 3 phases. We call it phases. It's going to all be done at one time, but in general, the phase A is considered basically the intersection project. So that's basically the bus road, BB intersection with the turn lanes and the signals. And it'll have, right now it's including turn lanes into Shady Grove property as well. Phase B is basically the temporary school, which is shown in the map. If your map is colored, it's the blue portion to the north. So it's directly in front of the school. It's the temporary improvements that are required there. So phase B is going to be 100% paid for by the school. That was part of their developers agreement as to be included with them. Phase C was an addition that the county had requested. They are planning to do the rest of County Highway BB heading into Madison next year following our project. And they had asked if we could basically pulverize and repave the section between where our intersection project ends and the work from Damascus Trail ended. So there's a stretch there that's basically, it's not going to get widened or anything. It's basically just going to get pulverized and repaved through there. And then they had also requested that the large culvert under County Highway BB be replaced. It's a CMP, and it's got basically it's failing in some areas. So they had requested that. So those items are 100% going to be paid for by Dane County for the Phase C portion. And then Phase A is, I'm working with staff, with JJ and Matt, and Phase A is being split between basically the village, the county, school district, and hopefully Shady Grove, assuming they go. If Shady Grove decides to not go, then there's going to be a change order of, some of the turn lanes anticipated to be taken out, or some of their improvements, because there's utility improvements that are included in there. The utility improvements are 100% covered by Shady Grove, so there is no cost split for the village or the school or anything on those. So it does get a bit of confusing on the Phase A as far as how all the cost splits are going to go, and we don't have exact final numbers on all that yet. We are including engineering and a construction estimate or construction services estimate with all those numbers. What's in front of you tonight is to basically approve the construction contract, which is with RG Houston for the project itself, which was, I believe it was if I have all the numbers in front of me, $1,500,000. And it'd be for all phases. $1,525,609.29 was the estimate. It's there with the bid quantities and everything. That's for all 3 phases on that. So I guess with that, that's kind of a quick summary. If anyone has any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer those. Or if I missed something, JJ or Matt, as far as the cost splitting and everything, just let me know.
Kevin, I just have a really probably not important question. Where is the culvert? I'm looking at the map.
The culvert itself it's kind of hard to basically tell. If you can kind of see where the station 110 plus 00 is, it's that diagonal line that's just to the right of that. That's where that drainage way that kind of runs across there is.
I see it. Thanks. How does for phase A, since there's so many people involved paying for it, like does someone hold escrow, or how does that work for payment since there's so many people involved?
Well, the school, it was part of the school's development agreement. So they're locked into a portion through their development agreement. And Matt, you can correct me or jump in if I say something wrong here, but with Shady Grove, the anticipation with that would be that we'd get into an agreement with them, whether that would be a developer's agreement if they move forward, it'd be included in that. Dane County, they've got a contract, I guess I call it a contract, but we have to put a number in there, which we've already been working with them prior to the bid, basically kind of giving an estimate at that point. And they basically at that point tentatively agreed to those numbers, but it's got to run through the county, and basically it'll be a reimbursement through Dane County.
Okay. I'll jump in there too, Kevin. David, that was good to meet you, by the way. This is Larry Konopecki. Sorry about the lack of video tonight. I'm a little bit limited in my internet speed, which everyone else is pretty familiar with. But to add to that, when there's complicated arrangements like this, we do try to put a hook in one way or another, and what you'll often find is it's different for different parties. Many of them, though, the most common is when we're accepting bids on projects in the right-of-way that we're completing that's part of a developer agreement. Usually we'll already have a surety in place, financial security instrument of some kind to cover those costs. In this case, we waive that for the village, for the school district of Middle Grove School District, just as a courtesy to another governmental entity that's backed by the full faith and credit of their ability to tax. So that's the exception, though, and not the rule. And so, Shady Grove is coming around relatively slowly, coming out of the COVID cycle, I guess. And if we had a development agreement in place with them already, we would have looked for some kind of a surety. So that's the way we'll generally operate.
Okay. And Larry, to your point, and good to meet you too. I mean, that was the Shady Grove portion. That was really where my question was coming from. Was obviously governmental entities, right? You could put some trust in them, right? But when it came to Shady Grove, I guess I was curious about that piece more than anything.
Right. We're going to be in touch with them here in the next few weeks, and we'll be bringing back more information to the board about how we can expect that to all occur.
Cool. Thank you.
So the Public Works Committee did recommend that the board approve this, but again, it's up for consideration right now. This is all on the timeline, and a lot of folks have been working hard to make sure that we're as close as done as possible when the new middle school / elementary school, I guess it's 3 through 5, I guess it's elementary, opens up in the August timeframe. So that's kind of why the push has been on, why we had the special meeting, and while Kevin is running around crazy right now for this project, so as well as Larry. So it's an exciting step forward to have a contractor consider this. And so any other questions from board members?
Just one additional comment, Sean. We do have the intersection portion of the project, which the village will obviously be paying a portion of, it is under the estimated budget. So just wanted to make sure that was part of the record for everybody here too.
Thanks, Matt.
If I can ask two questions. Was there only one bidder? I guess all the financial information I saw was just with one bidder.
There was only one bidder, Troy.
Okay. And then I had a town citizen ask me, Bus Road, where all the construction is happening, west side of the road is town, right side of the road is village. Will the town individuals still own to the center line of the road? How is that going to work? Like they do now.
I believe we took the entire right of way when that came in. So it's actually all village bus road's entirely village now.
So they're going to own to what? How far off the road will their property now start, and then JJ?
Essentially, any town property, and Kevin or anybody else can jump in, but I think their ownership stays the same. We didn't change the right of way on that side. It's just that it just changes who's
right. I could jump in on this. So, yeah. Troy, the property, we ran into some hassles with this, and I'll just quickly mention those. But the property owner's boundary line didn't change at all. It's just who owns the portion that's subject to the right-of-way. So it used to be that the town residents owned the right-of-way that was owned by the town, and now they own the right-of-way that's owned by the village. And so if you're a town resident, one of these properties right on that border, part of your parcel now is in the town and part of it's in the village, but they own the same thing. That actually creates a little bit of hassle for them when it comes to taxes, because they get a tax bill from two communities now. And we worked with the assessor to push those bills to as small a number as possible. And for those people who are concerned about that, we did just offer some options for dedication of that actual ownership of the right-of-way to the village. And we really haven't heard much back. I think once people got their tax bills, they saw they were so small that it wasn't a concern anymore. But it is confusing. It's very confusing for people. Thank you.
One thing I'll just throw in, I guess, just for the board to know, I think John had kind of alluded to this, but I guess we had discussed it at Public Works, and I did meet with a property owner out there in the town this last week that called after we sent out letters, met with them at the intersection of Lane Street out there, just to go over. I think their mailbox actually got hit by somebody the night before, so they were wondering whether to put it back or wait, and since it was going to get tore up anyway. So super nice and everything. So they were glad to go over the plans and everything as well. But the other item that was mentioned at Public Works is, so we've got a completion date of this project of basically September, I want to say September 3rd, but basically before school starts is the plan. And obviously barring any weather, we see no issues with getting the project done by then. However, with the signals, usually there's a lot of lead time for a lot of those with the controllers and the signals themselves. So it is possible that the signals may not be up and running by the time school starts. And we talked about it at Public Works that whether we would put in potentially put in just stop signs, basically make it almost like a four-way stop or something for the interim time until the signals were in place. Obviously, we don't know yet. Until the project gets awarded, we'll figure out lead times and stuff. I just kind of wanted to, I guess, let the board know that's the one item that we think it's very possible could be lagging beyond the dates.
Yeah, we had the situation with the school road intersection too, where some pieces were delayed a little bit, and it all worked out. But again, kind of at the mercy of some of those providers a bit. So Public Works did talk about at least a potential solution, or at least hopefully a very minor, very small term solution if need be. But hopefully it all works out and we can get all the pieces and parts and controllers and everything we need the contractor can to get it all working and functioning like it needs to be when school starts. Any other questions regarding this item?
I do have one question about the speed limit is it going to then be 35, until after this intersection? Like, are we extending the 35? Because I think it turns to 50 in the middle of this project.
I believe it's staying, I want to say it was at 45. I could be wrong on that. It could be, but I believe it is 45.
Yeah.
And I believe it needs to stay at 45, at least per the county. We did ask that right now. It could be something that could be adjusted, but since there is the town property that's adjacent to this as well on BB, when we asked the county anyway, they said that it was to remain at 45 right now. So that's something that we could be looking at some point. Bringing up speed limits, it's also possible working with the school district if they request it, was looking at possibly making a bus road a school zone with the signage there and everything. So can't remember off the top of my head, but I believe that the school district has to ask the village basically to do that, to basically just create a school zone for the bus road. So that may be something that would be coming up as well.
Sure, because there's a crosswalk.
Yes.
For kids in the town to cross at Lane Street, is that right? To get to
Correct.
Okay.
I move that we award the project to the County Highway VB Bus Road project to RG Houston.
Is there a second? All right. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Troy. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. That was the extent of the Public Works meeting right there. We'll move on then to the ad hoc diversity, equity and inclusion committee. That's Sarah and Melissa.
Yep. So we met last week, Wednesday, and had a brief presentation on DEI core concepts so that we're all using the same language and operating from a similar base. And then we talked about the draft DEI work plan and filled it in, added some things to it, started to build what we hope to be our work plan over the next year or two. And our next meeting, we're going to have a presentation by Lieutenant Wagner on some of our community demographics that he put together for the police report that will be good for this committee to hear. We'll be looking at a potential resolution for Asian American Pacific Islander hate crimes and condemning those. We'll be looking at an equity lens tool to help us take into consideration equity concerns when making decisions. And we'll be kind of putting together some suggested resources to have on the village website. So we've got those things kind of on deck for next meeting.
And I just wanted to note that it is Jewish American Heritage Month, it's Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and it's Older Americans Month. So,
wow! In May is for all of that, right? Yeah. Thanks, Melissa.
All right. All right. Any questions for Sarah or Melissa? All right. Wonderful. So we'll move on then to Ordinance Committee, and that is Heidi.
Thanks. We had a little hiccup with technology, because that'll happen sometimes. So our next meeting, we're just pushing our agenda to the next meeting in May. We did get some feedback from fire department on the Knox box, and so they're going to talk about that at Joint Fire, and then we'll see the bow hunting updates here at the village board soon. So I guess tune back in May.
All right. Thanks, Heidi. Move on then to reports from village officers, starting with Stanford. Larry? Did we lose Larry?
My screen froze up just for a second to click the mute button. Can everyone hear me now?
Yes, we can, Larry.
The only thing I would add to what's already on the agenda is running into the issue with technology on the Ordinance Committee. Just remember that in all the committees that all of our board members are on, if you do run into a situation where you've got a virtual meeting or a component of the meeting even is virtual, and you find out we misposted it, or for some reason people can't use that technology, you really shouldn't proceed even in a village board meeting with the agenda, because arguably that would be problematic with the open meetings law. So it's something to be taken very seriously, and I'm glad the Ordinance Committee knew and did do that.
All right. Thanks, Larry. Anything else? All right. Moving then on to COVID-19 update. Any of the individuals who I usually call on I don't want to rattle all you off, but have any updates for us related to COVID? Other than hopefully everybody's getting their vaccinations if they choose to do so.
Nothing from me.
All right. And as the saying goes, I think in this case, no news is good news.
Can I just ask when we will think about going back in person, at what point, or a time frame?
Yeah, I think that the next steps is right now our cable department is getting quotes for what it would take to switch over to hybrid in the future. So something for public relations committee to review and then make a recommendation to the board. We were hoping to do that this week, but it's taking some more time to get at least one quote. We haven't been able to get that so far. So once we have that, we'll bring it forward as soon as we can. But I think that's all coming up here shortly. Whether the timing on when it actually happens is kind of, that's certainly up to the board. And there might be various committees that choose to, for just the ease of virtual meetings and for lack of meeting space, some committees may decide to just continue meeting virtually into perpetuity. But does that answer your question, Melissa?
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the aspects to consider with going back to in person, and maybe Lieutenant Wagner can jump in here, but because the meeting is, of course, open to the public, at least under the current guidelines, being indoors, everyone would need to be masked, regardless of vaccination, because we don't, theoretically, the board and staff, if everyone's vaccinated, in 2 weeks beyond their vaccination, we could be indoors, spaced and unmasked, but the public format kind of changes that. So just something to consider.
All right. Thanks, Melissa, for asking the question. And Matt, hopefully soon, though, we'll have the option is the positive thing with all this. Next then is communication with business. First item there is consider approval of the vouchers. Any questions or comments with those?
I'll motion to approve the vouchers as listed.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a first and second. Any further discussion? Having heard none, all those in favor then?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstain? Motion carries. Next then is correspondence. I didn't have anything in mind. I don't know if others have things other than we all got the garbage, various emails and messages a week or so ago, and just sharing that I did speak with the town. They also have had some issues as well. So it's unfortunately a waste management issue. And I know JJ has been reaching out, connecting with them to share our concerns as well as Matt. So hopefully they'll get it sorted very quickly, because there aren't a lot of happy people right now about that. Okay, then we move on to upcoming community events. As the 80s hit us over the weekend and the warm weather, now we're getting rain. I'm sure there's starting to see more kids out playing and stuff, more park stuff, activities going on, which is very exciting. So I will open up and allow anybody that would like to share to please do so. We did have some events over the last weekend or so for Earth Day in the community, which is really nice to see. A lot of people picking up some trash and some people eyeing up some rain barrels from the village. Thank you to both JJ and Heidi for holding down the tent there, and with all the other tents at Inviting Shepherd. So, any other upcoming events?
I will note that on May 22nd from 10 to 2, I think, there's a brat fry at Colonial Club of Sun Prairie. The proceeds help benefit our older Americans and our older community members. And I will note that Miracle League is still looking for volunteers. If you go to their, I forget, Dane County miracleleague.org or .com, you can sign up and register there to volunteer. And I think June 9th is their opening night, but it's in June. So
Sean probably has it burned in his head, I'm sure.
Melissa, were you kicking on me? Older individual?
Only if you feel like that, Troy.
The Miracle League is coming together. I saw some work folks getting the pass put in the other day when I was out there for soccer. So it's really looking nice, exciting to see. And the final touches will also be done on the pavilion out at Bakken Park as well. Some cleanup stuff going on there. So pretty cool stuff. It really is nice out there now. We'll move then on to future agenda items. First one I have real quick is for the board members, committee assignments. We have David, who's just joined us. I'll be speaking with him this week. If you have a committee assignment that no longer works with your schedule or something of that sort, please let me know. We'll get it. Try to accommodate wherever we can. I've already gotten one due to a work conflict. And so I'll get that in front of everybody next time, as well as talk to David, get his thoughts on what his availability is as well. And then, of course, there'll be some committee memberships for citizens that will also be opening up too. So we're going back through those interest forms. First of all, reaching out and hearing back from those that currently on those committees where terms are coming up. And we do already have a few openings based on that feedback. So we'll try to get members back on those committees as soon as possible, at least in front of you guys for consideration. With that, Matt, anything? I know we've got a lot of stuff going on through plan. We got some more stuff talking about yet tonight in closed.
Yes, we'll have a whole series of action items related to District number 5. The expenditure period comes up here on May 19th, and our meeting is on the 17th, so we can get ahead of that deadline, and so we'll have all the development agreements finalized for any developments out there that may be receiving TIF incentives, and then we'll also have an action item related to the bike path to make sure that we can get the funds out of the TID and into an escrow, and working with Ellers and legal on that as well. So we could have anywhere from 4 to 5 or so items. So that's a good thing, and we can hopefully have the park pretty much filled up outside of maybe a couple acres.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Any questions from board members?
Will we start our prioritization process in next meeting or June, or start thinking about it?
Yes, I just glanced at my calendar, and I do have kickoff prioritization written on there. So, yes. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
And this is related to the federal funds, just to clarify. So that's.
I think what Heidi was referring to is the annual board organization, but
yep.
we'll be doing. I referenced. I think John, what you're referring to is the federal funds, and I referenced maybe an idea is the board going through a similar process for that. But I think that will probably happen later this year once we get further guidance from the federal treasury.
And as Heidi said, then it will be also nice to have our priorities figured out too. So that'll help that process then. All right. It's hard to believe we're already starting to talk priorities and we'll be into the budget cycle before we know it. All right. With that, then I will make a motion to go into closed session for the negotiation regarding land sale and development incentives in TID number 5. And the Village of Cottage Grove Board will enter a closed session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, parentheses 1, parentheses E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, investing public funds, or conducting other specified public business wherever competitive or bargaining reasons require a closed session. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you, Troy. This is a roll call vote. So, Lisa, please.
Allen,
Aye.
Murphy,
Aye.
Peterson,
Aye.
Ratcliffe,
Aye.
Valencia,
Aye.
Vandervelde,
Aye.
and Williams.
Aye. All right, with that, we will go into closed session. We'll jump out of this and come back here for those that stick around on Zoom.